Nice. This is what you wanted to make an entrance.
That might be one of my favorite things.
So George kind of talks a lot about failure, and it's hard for brands to be open about failure.
Yeah.
Was that something that came up this morning?
Actually, yeah, it was actually. There was, I think one of the points that was made is the success stories look great, but what that overshadows is all the work that comes before that, right? Which is for all the success stories that you guys see on stage, there's probably 5, 10, 15, 20 different examples of what didn't go right until you got there. And so certainly I think a lot of the retailers and agencies in the audience, you guys were certainly, I think there was one of the themes was how do we learn from failure? And I think we talked about it's certainly something that's often hard to share on stage, but that hopefully through the discussions is certainly something the audience, you guys were, I think, collectively wanting to learn from each other on how did you get to success, because usually it's not the first step.
So was this mostly a question of failures internally and making sure that they're discussed, or was it also outward facing?
I think both, right? I mean, I think there was, it was interesting. One of the first things that came up was the, what I would call almost a little bit of envy on the Cool King campaign that came up yesterday, actually, and the Kohler. It was a combination of the two, right? Which is, the ability to kind of invest in the brand with a more long-term time horizon, recognizing the need to define a brand. And so I think there was this notion of, hey, getting there certainly wasn't step one. Right? Like you didn't wake up one day, walk into the CEO's office and say, I have an idea, give me a bunch of money, I have no idea what the ROI is going to be, and thank you.
Linda, was that
right?
what you did?
That's how it went.
You guys just walked
just
into...
like that. That's right. So I think there was, there was this definitely desire and appetite to figure out how do you replicate that, right? I think a lot of people in the audience are dealing with what I think certainly the industry at large is, which is this is an ROI-driven medium. It's an ROI-driven channel and category. And so there's a lot of kind of interest and curiosity of how do you get from, hey, I'm responsible for driving a very specific return on investment into the perspective that is, actually, we're going to invest in the brand, right? And we expect that's going to have results over time, but we're going to measure it differently. But we know we need to, because if we don't fill the top of the funnel, then the more we grind the bottom, it's not, like we can't grow that way. So there was, I think, a general, consistent level of, hey, I want to do that.
Right.
How do I make that happen?
Is there a sense of fear still that the fear of experimentation, the fear of doing something new and putting money behind it? Was that something that you guys talked about?
A little bit. Not from the people that are here. I think what everyone is still dealing with is a C-suite fear.
Okay.
And we definitely talked about the legal fear, which is a different, it's kind of subset of that. But certainly there is a, we joked about the fact that the lawyer's job ultimately is to protect against every potential scenario that may ever happen, right? And as a result of that, you end up hoping that something might be done in a day, and you're 3 weeks later you're still selling through legal. But so we talked about the fear that still exists, again, I think at that C-suite, and not necessarily fear, but unknown, right? That this is, we're in that medium where we're damned if we do, damned if we don't. We have the metrics, we have the ability to perform. As a result, even though there are these cool social things, these cool content things we can do, the C-suite's going to expect a different level of performance. And I think it's that gap. Maybe it's less fear, but it's still education level at that senior level, which is the topic.
Did anybody talk to you guys, or has anybody in the room kind of figured out a way to kind of get over that gap or jump over that gap?
As a result of looking at both the Kohler discussion and the Keen discussion, I think what we talked about was a little bit of the notion of if you sell in any one thing, right? If you want to sell in a campaign idea, that's actually a lot harder than if you're going to sell in a big initiative that's going to span time and span, quote, campaigns or projects. That if you go sell the strategy of where you want to go over the next 12, 18 months and why you want to make certain investments, that the ability to then do one cool, new, interesting thing actually is easier.
Right.
And so, we just touched the surface of that. That seemed to get a bunch of head nods as that came up, which is, that strategy makes sense. So the theme, I think, was maybe a little bit of settling in, or maybe a reminder of the thing to do is not sell in one thing, to sell in the big change that's necessary, and then you're going to be able to do a lot of the cooler things in a more consistent way.
I saw a tweet this morning that was kind of the one thing you want to take away from DRS, and I don't remember who it was that tweeted it, but they had a good answer. Did you guys touch on what people wanted from coming to a place like this, networking or whatever, or the sessions?
We did. a little bit of both yesterday and today. I think so. What were some of the more? I mean, so that learning from failure definitely was a key piece people wanted to learn more of. I think there was a continued desire to learn more about how to make these things work. I thought one of the particular interesting comments was there was a feeling like that the King guys, you must have just broken the bank, right? That in order to do this, it must have been a whole mess of money. And how do you make actually what probably was less money look that big, right? So that was one of the things that was very interesting, which is applying that type of thing, knowing potentially more limited budgets or even with bigger budgets. That was interesting. We got back to attribution again today. ROI continued to come up. It's, I think the consistent theme that I sense is everyone is trying to invest in the next scalable thing. Everyone's staring at a bunch of cool things to do and figuring out how do you justify that to the organization, which is just saying, go spend money on a highly ROI positive basis, right? Just go bring me more paid search, right? And you guys are all saying, I want to do that, but all the other stuff is going to have different metrics. Like figuring out how to sell that into me, I think is the theme.
Lastly, anything about sort of internal creativity, kind of inspiring people, motivating people? Because I think a lot of these things, while important, not exactly inspirational stuff. Like, how does attribution? But is there anything about sort of inspiring that storytelling, creativity, just in the town halls and in your discussions with everybody?
Yeah, I think so. It came up in this way. I think it goes back to the education theme, right? Which is if you're going to be able to get the types of, if you're going to do cool stuff, right, then we're certainly in an age where we still got to sell in the C-suite. And in order to sell in the C-suite, you're going to have to motivate them and educate them on why this is worth that investment. Right. And so that is what's coming up. I don't know that, I don't know if it came up in a different way, but there is that theme of if you're going to get this done, don't forget, you're still dealing with a lot of people that don't live in this world. And yeah, when you start talking about attribution, you start talking about campaign segments and ROI at a certain level, we're headed down here. Right. And the things that we want to sell in are certainly much higher level strategic conversations. That is where I think that creativity and that storytelling education comes in. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's where we are hitting it.
Well, it helps. Cool. Matt, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
This is great.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
So, going from storytelling